This is Christian Book Blurb, brought to you by author and songwriter Matt McChlery. Get a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the lives of some of your favourite Christian authors, hear about their books and faith. Also, why not check out my website, mattmcclery.com. This episode is sponsored by the memoir Standing in the Storm, Living with Faith and Cancer, by yours truly, Matt McChlery. You can grab yourself a signed copy from my website, mattmcclery.com. You can get it anywhere online, or indeed from your local Christian bookshop. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Christian Book Blurb podcast, where we like to encourage you in your discipleship one book at a time, as we meet some amazing Christian authors and learn about their books, their lives, and their faith. Well, I'm your host, Matt McChlery. Thanks for joining me today. And on today's show, I'm going to be talking about the Sound of Music movie and God with the author Bryony Wood. So let's welcome Bryony to the show. Hi, Bryony.
Hello, Matt. It's really good to be here today.
Thanks so much for joining us. I can't wait to chat all about the Sound of Music film. I mean, just saying those words, all of a sudden, loads of songs jump into my mind. It's fantastic. So thanks for joining us. It's clear that from the book that you've written called The Sound of Musings, see the play on words there? Very clever. The Sound of Musings. That the Sound of Music movie... You must love it, and having read it, there's this real love for the film. So how did you come to fall in love with the Sound of Music movie so much?
I was about 8 years old when I first went to watch the movie. In fact, it was my first experience of cinema, and I remember sitting between my mum and my grandma, and I was absolutely enthralled by the huge screen in front of me and the story unfolding. And there was something about Maria that really inspired me. I wanted to be like Maria. I wanted to run across the hills dressed in curtains and twirl, and anybody that ever came to my house afterwards, I'd stand on the coffee table and I'd serenade them with all the songs, bearing in mind I didn't have and still don't have the best of voices. So I do remember people kind of laughing behind cushions as I was singing whatever song. And shortly after that, it must have been Christmas or my birthday, and I was given the LP. And it was the only LP I owned between being the age of 8 and being about the age of 12. And so I played it constantly. And it was, but I didn't have the official LP. I had the kind of cut down cheap version that didn't have all the songs on it. So there were some songs that I only ever saw when I actually watched the movie. But I had to wait till it was Christmas 1978 that the film was first shown on British television. And I had to wait till then before I saw the movie again, because of course in those days we didn't have videos and DVD players. We had to wait for it to come on. And so it was a huge thing to watch it again. Now I'm the only one in my family that actually likes The Sound of Music. So whenever I want to watch it, and I've got a DVD of it, my kids and my husband go, "Oh, you're not watching that thing again, are you?" And they all walk out. So for years, I thought it was my guilty pleasure. I thought I was the only one that ever liked it. And it was only a few years ago when I was having a conversation with my then bishop, Bishop Martin in Leicester, and said that I just loved The Sound of Music. And his face lit up, and he said it was his family's favourite movie. And I suddenly realised that if a bishop likes it, well, perhaps I could admit to liking it too. And one thing led to another, and here we are.
That's really fascinating. That's fantastic. Thank you. And for our listeners as well, if you are a Sound of Music fan, why don't you pop over to our Facebook group, search for the Christian Book Blurb fan page on Facebook, and join our group. And why don't you share your favorite Sound of Music moments or your favorite song or something like that? We can really get a great discussion going around this. Bryony, why a devotional book? The Sound of Musings is a devotional book. I mean, there are Christian themes in the movie, but they're not particularly strong. So why a devotional?
I didn't set out to write a devotional book. I set out because at that time I was a parish vicar, and I'd been on holiday for a significant birthday, and I'd said because it was my birthday, I wanted to go to Salzburg. And we had an amazing week in Salzburg and seeing the place and doing all of that. And I suddenly realized that when I came back to the parish, that so many people loved the Sound of Music, and they'd been to Salzburg, and then we ended up having a themed birthday party, and everybody came dressed as nuns, and I made little cakes with raindrops and roses on it, and we had brown paper packages. We had so much fun, and I thought this is a really good thing to use as a Bible study. And I thought there's been lots of Bible studies done about different films, but I couldn't find one on the Sound of Music. So I thought, well, I'll write one. So I started to write what I thought would be a 6-week Bible study for my own particular parish. But by the end of the first song, as I sat down with a pen and paper in one hand and the remote control in the other, and I thought, right, I'm going to watch the film and see what comes out of it. By the end of the first song, The Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Music, I'd written 4 separate reflections and thought, this has got such a lot in it. And for a film that's about nuns, we don't think of it as a Christian film, but embedded in every song and in every scene, in every character, there is so much that speaks about God's love. And I guess I've got a kind of a quirky brain. I've done lots of short thoughts, thought for the days, pause for thoughts for radio, hundreds of them over the years, and my brain kind of links weird things with God, and it's just how it works. And I realized that that's what was going on here. That everything spoke about a different aspect of God's character, but it also linked in with a really specific Bible passage as well. So didn't set out to write a devotional. I set out to try and link something that was very real on screen as a story, a film that people could equate to, but how they could then think about that for themselves too.
Hmm.
And I was
Hmm.
originally going to call it Raindrops on Roses, but I was sitting at the computer one day, and it was a real God thing, that this whole sense of the Sound of Musings. And I just knew that's what it was, to be called. And God, this is such a God thing. He has really shaped it and guided every word.
And just before we started recording this episode, we were chatting about um, sort of anniversaries and things. So, what's significant about the timing of the release of the book, and what significant thing in the world of the Sound of Music is happening just around the corner?
Again, when I first started writing the book, I hadn't realized, but it became quickly apparent that in 2025, it will be the 60th anniversary of the film's release. And when I looked back and saw how the world responded to the 50th anniversary or the 57th anniversary, I began to realize that the 60th will be huge. And last year we got the news that Christopher Plummer had passed away, but Julie Andrews is still very much, alive and linked with the Sound of Music. So it is my hope and prayer that next year, as the world celebrates 60 years of a film, an iconic film that, is loved across the world, that this will be a gateway for people to be able to access another way of watching the film and linking the film into their own journey of faith.
Speaking of linking films to journeys of faith and things, how can we, as individuals, be more open to hearing God speaking to us through things like films or books or whatever it is? Even if they're not sort of, have that Christian label or that church label on the side, because when you pick up a Christian book, you kind of go, oh yes, I'm expecting to learn about God here. But when you just pick up, a novel or a fantasy novel or whatever it is, you're not necessarily doing that with the intention to hear from God or to learn something about God. But in your experience, how can we kind of turn all of life's experience into listening to finding God in it?
I think when we remember that we're body, mind, and spirit, that God gave us a heart to feel and a mind to think, and that we, we have an intellect, but we also have a spirit that's open to His Spirit, and His Spirit works in the world and it works in us before we even know, because that's why we end up finding and discovering about Him, because the Spirit has been opening our hearts and our minds to discovering about Him. So when we remember that, we can watch things and ask God to open our eyes to what we see around us. There's a really lovely story in the Bible, an account of when a young boy called Samuel was in the house of Eli, and he'd been given into the service of the Lord. And he keeps on hearing this voice calling him, Samuel, Samuel. And he thinks it's Eli the priest that's saying, that's calling him, he needs help. But then they quickly realize that actually it's God that's calling him. And he says, Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And I think if we have that perception of speak, Lord, for we are listening, that actually God still speaks to us. And He doesn't just speak through the words of the Bible, He speaks through creation, He speaks to other people, He speaks. He speaks through the joy of a newborn baby and looking at how wonderfully they're made, or the splendor of the mountains, or a sunset. He speaks in so many ways. And certainly He can speak through films and books.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Now, there are 52 chapters in your book, The Sound of Musings, so we won't be dealing with them all on the podcast today. So there has a big hint for anyone listening to this. Go and buy the book. That's
Oh, yes,
really
please.
good. Um, but I would like to touch on a few of the chapters, if I may. The first one has got to be for me the chapter called Edelweiss, because this is personally my favorite song in the film. Can you tell us what prompted you to think about, how have you linked that song Edelweiss with Christianity or our discipleship? What's the link that you found there?
When I watched Edelweiss, I must admit it was one of those that wasn't quite so obvious as some of the other ones. But like you, I loved this film. I have an Edelweiss necklace that I was given as a 9-year old. I have the 2-cent coin that I brought back from Austria that's got the Edelweiss written on the euro coin. I've got a bag with Edelweiss on it. It's kind of a thing. I've got Edelweiss in the garden. It's all about Edelweiss. So it's a very small, simple song, and I used to sing it to my children when they were babies.
Just before you tell us the link, we've been talking about this Edelweiss thing like everyone knows what it is. And when you say you've got it in the garden, um, so what is Edelweiss, first of all, in real life? And then, and it's a song that they sing about this thing in the movie. But what is Edelweiss in real life?
Well, Edelweiss is a very small flower, and it grows really high on the mountains. And it's beautiful. It's a white flower with it's a bit. You could think it looks like a daisy, but it doesn't. It's very specific. And the thing about Edelweiss is that the tradition was that if your lover gave you a bunch of Edelweiss, it symbolized courage and bravery and love, because they would had to have gone really high into the mountains to collect the Edelweiss for you. And that was the link that then I
Okay,
could bring in to the film,
okay.
because it speaks about courage and bravery and love. And we see the captain singing it with the children after a meal, and it's after kind of the turning point where he's become much softer. And music has come back into the household after years of his grief where there was no music. And so he sings it to the children, and then they're harmonizing. And that's a really lovely image of how there's harmony coming back into the family through this love of music, through everything that's going on. And then, if you remember at the end of the film, the family are doing this festival performance, and the Nazis are there waiting to take the captain off because they're going to get him to be part of their naval command. And the family sing about it. And what they know that nobody else knows is that they are going to make a bid for freedom. So, symbolizing the love he has for the country that he serves, but also his love for freedom and righteousness as he's going to escape from that Nazi stronghold. So, there's huge amounts in there. So, I think it's really symbolic. And so I talk about the symbols that we have in church that help us to think about God's love in a way that we can equate to and we can understand, because quite frankly, God's love is so huge and so magnificent that we need something symbolic to be able to hold on to give us a glimpse of what that means. So the Edelweiss is something really symbolic, that when we are brave enough to seek God's love, we can find something incredibly real. And as the song goes, may we bloom and grow forever.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great. Thank you. Um, Now, Climb Every Mountain is another song-themed chapter, where you tell the story of something from your childhood in that chapter. Can you kind of just retell that to us now? Because I really enjoyed that.
Well, when I was a little girl, as I said, I had this one LP and I used to play it all. But when it came to Climb Every Mountain, I would lift up my record player's arm and skip it onto the next chapter because I thought this song was really boring. It was like really dirgy and boring. So, and I didn't like it because I loved Lonely Goat Herd and Do Re Mi and all that exuberant stuff. Because when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I didn't understand about the power that this song carried. I hadn't come to terms with, the way that life has ups and downs and that we have to deal with these things. But it was as I got older and I'd climbed a few mountains of my own and I'd had to ford some streams and follow my dreams and all the things that Reverend Mother sings about. And I began to realize the depth that's in this song. And when I do an event in church and we have this song playing, it becomes a worship song. And frequently I see people move to tears as they link what they're going through or what they've gone through. And it reminds them of the power of God's love. You see, in life, there are times when we wish we could skip over something that's hard, like a song track, but we can't. We have to go through it. We have to go through the valley of the shadow of death. We have to climb the mountain. And so this reminds us that when we're in that, we're not alone, that we have somebody with us who is holding us every step of the way.
That's great. And that's so true. Now, I was intrigued. You wrote a whole chapter in your book about the intermission of all things. I mean, wow, you even got something from the intermission, which is fantastic. Now, this isn't something many modern day cinema goers will be familiar with. So, first of all, what is an intermission? This old fashioned thing, what is it?
When you used to watch a film at the movies in the olden days, like when I used to watch The Sound of Music, there would be a space halfway through when everything would go blank, a bit like the advert break now, and it would be a chance for everybody to go into the loo and buy an ice cream or whatever, which Sound of Music is a long film. It's almost 3 hours. So, it would be a welcome break. But there's something about it that really made me smile. You see, the intermission is very much part of the film's pace. Maria has arrived at the Von Trapp villa. Maria leaves the Von Trapp villa. And without spoiling the plot too much, Maria returns to the Von Trapp villa, which echoes the account of Jesus' life. You see, he had always been. We see from John's Gospel that Jesus had always been. He was the one with God the Father and God the Spirit that spoke all of creation into being. There was never a time when he wasn't alive and real, but there was a time when he chose to step onto the earth as part of our humanity. He arrived as a baby. He left when he was crucified and resurrected and then ascended into heaven. And the Bible tells us that he will return. So we are living in the intermission of God's story, because we know that we're living in that kingdom bit of now but not yet. It's been started but it's not fully completed, and there will be a day when God's kingdom will be completed. So we are living between the intermission of the beginning of this kingdom with Christ and then the conclusion of it at the end of all time, the intermission of all of that.
That's really clever. And we are you're right, we are living in the intermission. So I hope everyone's enjoying their popcorn while we wait for the next bit to begin again. And speaking of intermissions and intervals, we are just about to take a short break ourselves. You see how I did that? It's great timing.
That's clever, Matt. You've done this before, haven't you?
And so join us on the other side of these. See you soon. Hi, I'm author Matt McChlery. Standing in the Storm is my story of living with faith and cancer in 2016. Packed full of hope, this book will make you laugh and cry. But more importantly, it will help to turn your heart towards Jesus and give you the strength to stand within whatever storm you may be facing. Standing in the Storm, Living with Faith and Cancer is available wherever good books are sold. Get your copy today. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, you can help keep it on the web. All you've got to do is buy me a coffee. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/Matt McChlery to make a donation. There is a link in this episode's show notes. So go on, buy me a coffee today and help this podcast to keep supporting Christian books and authors. Hello, welcome back to the Christian Book Blurb podcast. I've been chatting with the author Bryony Wood all about her book, The Sound of Musings, where we've been talking about the Sound of Music movie and God. So do go and get yourself a copy of that book, especially ahead of the special 60th anniversary year of the film, which is happening in 2025. Right, Bryony, this is the part of the podcast where we get to know you a little bit better. We know you love the Sound of Music movie, but I'm sure there's more to you than just that. So what do you do for fun? What do you enjoy doing?
I love to play. I've always had a kind of a mischievous spirit, I suppose, and I love to dance and play and laugh and play games. Last night, I'm not sure whether my family, they certainly don't know this yet, but last night I discovered something that I think will become a big part in my life. I was looking for something that was give me a bit of exercise, because I need to do more exercise. I love being with people, so I wanted something sociable, but I'm not really a gym bunny. So I thought if I went dancing, then that would be a good way. So some friends dragged me along to the local Morris dancing thing last night, and I had a whale of a time bouncing and skipping all evening. And I woke up this morning with a huge grin on my face because it was such fun and really good exercise. So anything that makes me smile, whatever that may be, I love spending time with my family and my grandchildren. I love flowers and being out in creation. I just love life and life in all its fullness.
Speaking of games, board games, do they feature very much?
They do. Less board games, but more things. If I'm allowed to give things like Rummy Cub and Quirkle and
Mm.
Backgammon. My husband and I, we've got a caravan and we go away in our caravan or spend evenings at home. And in fact, it's one of the things I talk about in the book about praying and playing together. I think is something that really enriches our relationship. But it's that playing. I think when we stop being childlike, we lose something of the joy. And Jesus, talks to us about being like a child, and that's not being, infantilizing us. It's just let's keep engaging. I mean, uh, I could be known to be hula hooping in the back garden just to loosen up my back and have a bit of fun. So
Yeah, that's really
anything where
good.
there's a bit of fun.
I normally ask, well, what's your favorite movie? But we know that one.
Yeah,
So
there's quite anything with a. I mean, I have to say that my music playlist. Again, it's not often played publicly because it is rather cheesy, but I love songs that make me want to dance and sing along to them. So anything that's got a bit of fun.
how about something to eat?
I love food, which is why I need to do more exercise. I love cooking, and it's a family joke that um, I might start with a recipe that starts off being, a chicken curry, but it ends up being a beef stroganoff or something. I have a pathological um, incapability of following a recipe. It starts off with something, and there might just be one thing that's left of the original recipe. Because I love cooking because I love having people round, and it's the way that I relax and just enjoy. I love the process of it, but I love the end result of hospitality. So food and my natural choices would be the things that all are really unhealthy. So I have to work really hard at having a healthy diet. I try and honor my body as being a temple of the Holy Spirit, but sometimes it feels a little bit like it's bursting at the seams.
Have you got any family?
Yes, I have a husband, and we are about to celebrate our 35th wedding anniversary. I have four children, two of which I gave birth to, and two of which I inherited when my husband and I got married. And they're all really precious. They're all adults now, all doing very different things. They all have their own joys, and we love spending time with them. They get on really well. It was through our children meeting that my husband and I got together. So their bond is really good. And I've got five grandchildren aged between 19 and 5. So
Mhm.
always a joy to have them. Love. I've got a photograph of me smiling with an armful of grandchildren. But what you can't see is that we're watching The Sound of Music.
Ah,
And it was one of those moments when I just felt that my world was so brimming of joy that I was sitting with grandchildren, introducing them to The Sound of Music.
I was going to ask, have you made them all outfits out of the curtains yet?
Yeah, they really wouldn't wear them. They tolerate, but they recognise that grandma's going off on one a bit, really.
And whereabouts in the country do you live? In the UK. So you haven't quite built yourself a house in Salzburg just yet. So whereabouts are you now?
I live smack bang in the UK. I live in Robin Hood country in Nottinghamshire, and it's an amazing place to live. It's a place where people tend to drive through to somewhere else. But actually, what we've got here is this place with huge amounts of history. I was leading a church service on Sunday because I'm a priest in the Church of
Mm.
England, so I cover churches that are in interregnum or the vicar's sick or something. So I was covering a church on Sunday, and the bell was tolling every 15 minutes, and that bell had been in situ, and I can't remember, it was 1432 or 1452. So I was hearing a bell that had been heard all that time in that village. And it was a bell that when the sister of Henry VIII, Margaret Tudor, she was sent as a 14-year-old to marry King James in Scotland. And she stayed nearby and she would have heard that bell. And
Mm.
I love the history of Nottinghamshire. I often do a service at Babworth Church, which is where the Pilgrim Fathers all came from, amongst other churches around here. So the history here is incredible.
Oh, really fascinating. Coming back to your writing and the book, The Sound of Musings, I know we chatted a bit before we started recording this episode, so I know you've got lots of interesting things coming up. And looking at your website, there's already loads of stuff going on around the book that people can access, like downloadable study guides and sort of live events that you can do, and all sorts of other fun things. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the extras, the extra bits that kind of can accompany the Sound of Musings book?
Well, you're right, Matt. The book is just the beginning. In a way, I'm more of a speaker than I am a writer. What I found is that I'm not the only person in the world that likes the sound of music, and it's an incredibly rich resource for churches to be able to offer a mission-focused evening where we have a lot of fun, lots of laughing, and it's a way of gently introducing faith and talking about life, love, and faith to people who are perhaps on the fringes of church. And to see them come along and engage and then have the conversations with them afterwards. I'm an evangelist, so it absolutely fills me with joy to see how the book can be used for that. But it's also a book that, although it's very accessible, it's a book that goes deep. And so if you've been in church for 30, 40 years, you can still get new insights into God's love. And it seems to work at the different levels. I always felt that church should operate a bit like the film Toy Story, that works at a level that children can cope, but also adults love. And that's what I wanted to write. And so this book I've done it with discipleship days. And in fact, I've got the first of some retreats coming up. So I'm doing a week-long retreat based on the Sound of Musings at Scargill House in North Yorkshire. And that's going to be in June. And we will be doing a lot of creative things, a lot of thinking, a lot of praying, a lot of singing, a lot of walking up hills for those that want to, and actually really engaging with the whole message. So again, there is so much that we can do with this. And the study guide, I decided rather than publish it and sell it separately, I wanted to give a resource to the church that was free. And when I was a vicar, I was always looking for resources that weren't cheesy, that weren't too prescriptive, that would give people an opportunity to come together, to invite their neighbours round if they were just wondering what church was all about, to be able to explore some of the themes. And each one of the 6 sessions stands on its own with a film clip. But you could do all 6, or you could just do 4, or you could add an extra one and have a sing along, a Sound of Music night. So there are so many things that people can do as a missional thing or as a discipleship thing. And I just love it when churches phone me up and say, come and do this with us. And I'll go anywhere. I do go anywhere.
You climb every mountain.
I climb every mountain. I've even shared it in Australia when I was in Australia last year.
That's fantastic. And where can people find you online to access these downloadable resources, or to book themselves on a retreat, or to buy the book, or where can people find you?
Well, I've got a website which is bryonywood.co.uk. So that's BRYONY wood.co.uk. They will also find it if they put the soundofmusings.co.uk, because that I also made sure that people can access it that way as well. But you can buy the book you can order it from any shop. Shops can order it through their regular channels. You can get it through Amazon and other online like Aslan and Eden Books. You can buy it from me, and if you buy it from me through the website, I sign it, but I wrap it in brown paper packaging tied up with string and send it anywhere in the UK. I have sent copies to Australia. I've sent copies all over as people have wanted it, and then we just do that as the postage requires. But it's all on the website, and as I say, you can get it through any other bookshop as well.
That's wonderful. And what we'll do for the benefit of our listeners is I will put a link to your website in this episode's show notes so that people can just scroll to the bottom wherever they're listening, find the show notes, and then click on the link, and it'll take them to where they want to go. So we'll do that as well. Well, Bryony, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your love and passion for the sound of music and for God. So thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Matt.
And it does seem funny saying thank you to yourself, but hey ho, there you go. That's the situation I find myself in today. A special thank you to the memoir Standing in the Storm, Living with Faith and Cancer, a book that I wrote that sponsored the show today. Don't forget, you can grab yourself a signed copy from my website, mattmcchlery.com, get it anywhere online, or indeed order it in your local Christian bookshop. And thank you as well for listening to this episode of the Christian Book Blurb podcast. Don't forget, it comes out twice a month on the 1st and the 15th. So I look forward to having the pleasure of your company again really, really soon on the next edition of the Christian Book Blurb podcast. Thank you and goodbye. Thanks for listening to Christian Book Blurb with your host, Matt McChlery. Do give it a like, give it a share, and let your friends know all about it. We do hope to see you again soon on another Christian Book Blurb.